So good evening, everyone. I think I know everyone here on the call, but just in case, I am Danny Mando, and tonight should be, if nothing else, very entertaining. So we're going to have the immediate past president of FJMC, the one and only Allan with two L's, Kahan. A few weeks ago, I heard him talking about challah baking. He makes the best challah. No one can beat me. I'm the best. So I said, Allan, we still have this cooking thing that no one really does, except so why don't we do a challah baking and you can teach us all your magnificent trip. And he was like, sure. So it has come to fruition. And here we are tonight. So I don't really think Allan needs a lot of introduction, but I will share with you that besides being the immediate past president of the FJMC, he is an avid baker. He's been baking for, I think he said 70 years now since law school.
50.
Oh, 50. 50 years since his law school days. So we're very excited to have this cooking webinar and feature Allan. So Allan, take it away.
Thank you. Yes, I started baking challah while in law school. I went to University of Tulsa. I couldn't find a challah, so I came up with one. This recipe is not the one that I came up with. This one is actually better than mine. This one, in one of the online magazines, this was determined to be the best, and it is quite delicious. It's not my recipe, but it is quite delicious. So initially what we, start, if you look, Helene, if you'll, basically we're going to be using a little salt, honey, oil, bread flour. One of the things that I said on my recipe is bread flour has a higher gluten. It's a wheat with a higher gluten, but bread flour is much more expensive than regular flour. You can buy, should you wish, wheat gluten, and I'll show you. I get no benefit from this. Often I will use regular flour and I will use a wheat gluten, and that for every cup of flour, you put a tablespoon of gluten, so that can significantly reduce the price. Gluten flour with high gluten has the ability to be spongy and stretch. So the first thing that we do is we will put some salt, 1 tablespoon for this recipe. And then we want to proof the yeast. As most of you should know, yeast is a live material, and what we want to do is make sure the yeast is live. The way you do that is proofing the yeast. I purchased the 1 pound bag at Costco. It was great during COVID because I had lots of yeast and many people did not. This particular recipe with 2.5 pounds of flour, which I've measured beforehand, uses anywhere from 1.5 tablespoons to 2 tablespoons of yeast. Okay, we've done that. And then the other thing is yeast freeze-dried can stay for years in the freezer because it's in an inert stage. What I will do is I will warm up water, 2 cups of water, and I will use a yeast and a roast thermometer so that I know that the water is not too hot nor too cold. And I'll take about a half of the water, mix it with the yeast, add the rest of that. And the reason that I'll do it in a glass is that make sure that it's mixed. Normally I'll put it in a dark room or a dark area, And after about a minute or two, you will see bubbles that will start being shown on the mixture, the yeast mixture. Okay, we got one egg. I'm amazed that this particular recipe only requires one egg. So we've got the salt. We're going to go with 5/8 of a cup of vegetable oil. And since my measuring cup does not have 5/8, I will do it basically halfway between the half and 3/4. I'll usually, since we're going to be using honey, in order that the honey be easily come out, I'll coat the measuring cup so that I can then put the honey, 3/4 of a cup of honey. And I use, obviously each type of honey is a little different. I use wildflower. The primary honey that most Americans have is clover honey. Now, once I finish that, I will begin to mix it. You've got the salt. There was sugar in the, and I've measured out the 2.5 cups of flour. And so literally, one of the things that I purchased is a scale, a digital scale, which has the ability to do a tare or okay. If you look, you can see that there's bubbles, which means that the yeast is alive, it is active. And what it's doing is creating bubbles filled with carbon dioxide. Now, just to show you that, yes, it's true, we're going to wait about another 10, 15, about maybe a minute. Let's see. And then we will start the flour. As I said, when I use regular flour and add the wheat gluten, what I will do is I will make sure that it's fully mixed, because you want, whenever you're kneading, you want the dough to be fully mixed. So literally in the additional minute, it's probably grown another 1/2 inch, which shows you that yes, your yeast is alive, because if your yeast is not alive, it is not going to make a very light and fluffy dough. Okay. Then, like anything that you're making in a mixer, you want to come a little closer. And slowly putting in the dough. There is another batch that I made earlier this evening that when we're finished putting this in in a place to start rising, I'll take that out and show you how to braid. And literally, I put in like a 1/2 cup at a time and making sure that the flour fully mixes with the liquid. And so you've got honey, you've got the salt, the water, and the egg and oil. Okay, Helene, come over and yeah, I put the oil in there.
Okay.
At the,
You want me to come
here,
where?
come and take a look.
At what, the mixer?
The mixer in the
Okay.
mixing bowl.
Okay.
And as you can see, it looks like almost a, what would I call it? Solution, but as you put more of the flour in, you begin to see that it's starting to thicken up. Now, years ago, a quick aside, years ago, there was a family friend that made challah. And before he passed away, he and his wife were survivors. And before he passed away, I was able to get his recipe. And the recipe was a true baker's recipe because it did not define how much water, because the amount of water that you will use in a recipe depends on the humidity that the flour might be. So okay, I'm trying to get to where there's about less than a cup left. And what I will start to do is this mixer. I initially started making bread with a mixer and then my hands to knead it. As I got older, I said, wait a second, it's much easier with a heavy duty mixer. This is a KitchenAid, which I bought once I got out of law school. Okay, there's about a cup left. So what I will do is, wanting to make sure that the dough is fully mixed, I will make sure the I'm almost at the point where I will change the blade. This particular mixer has, and most of them will have both a mixing blade, as well as a kneading blade. And the kneading blade, basically what it does is stretch the dough and causes the dough to become elastic. And yes, I've washed my hands about 15 times this evening. Okay, so the individual, the family friend who used to bake challahs for every Rosh Hashanah, as I said, I was able to, prior to him passing, met him and his wife at one of the kosher markets in the city, and they were, and he was able to give me the recipe. And his daughter, who had never received it, was most appreciative when I gave it to her. Okay, so if you take a look, you want to look, okay, as you can see, the dough is starting to be more like a ball. And I want to get as much of the dough that might be on the sides of the bowl mixed into this. And if you look, what it's doing is it's twisting the dough. And that's the dough hook. And as we get closer to the full amount of flour, you will see the dough get smoother and smoother in its texture. And because I want to make sure that all the dough is fully mixed, what I will do is usually about one or two times during the mixing, I will push down the dough so that the moister dough can interact with the dry flour, which is at the bottom of the mixer. Two and a half pounds done. Okay, I'm assuming that you can all see the dough, which is being twisted by the dough hook. And if you look closer, you'll see that the sides of the bowl are getting cleaner and cleaner. Basically, we've got the right amount of flour. And once I see that the sides are pretty clean, what I will do is I will then set a timer to let's say, knead the dough for about 8 minutes. And here's what you can do. You can see the texture of the dough. You know, it's a bit less smooth than it should become. And so as you're kneading it, it will get smoother and smoother. And about 7, 8 to 10 minutes will be sufficient. Sometimes what you find is that because the measurements may not be exact in terms of the oil or water, sometimes you'll need an additional tablespoon of flour. So I'm seeing where the bottom of the thing of the dough is really a bit moist. So I'm putting in about a tablespoon of additional flour. Okay, does anybody have any questions while we're doing this? I know there was somebody that asked, is there a vegan recipe? And yes, there is. I've never made it. You know, but I have seen vegan recipes that do not use egg. Are there any questions? There was also one question about adding we'll say raisins or
Alan, why did you put the yeast in the cabinet?
why did I put the yeast in
the glass in the cabinet.
better if it's, you know, and the reason I do it in a glass is that you easily see whether the yeast is alive. What will happen is the yeast will bubble up, where if you put it into the bowl, it's going to be less apparent that the yeast is active. And I want to make sure every time, even though it has yet to fail me, I want to make sure every time that the yeast is active. And since, as I said, you know, if I mismeasured a little of the water, it may need a little more of the flour. And then I will allow this to continue to
Alan,
Yes,
what speed do you have the mixer on?
at the
What number?
slowest speed that I can have it,
Okay.
because if it's too fast, it will go flying. All you're really trying to do, if you were hand kneading this, your hands do not work particularly fast. So it's really not the speed at which, it's just the blade is doing most of the work for you. You know, could I have done this? Yes, with hand mixing. Yes, that's what I did for about 15 years, or about 5 years. And then I said, wait a second, let me work. Let me let the machine do the work rather than me. Okay, we've got about, let's see, we've got about 3 minutes left. And then what I will show you is, since as I said, I have another batch that is rising in the dining room, so that we'll be able to show you how to braid. You know, I'm going to give it another 3 minutes. The more you need, basically, the finer will be the texture of the challah. And it will what it will do is it will cause the gluten to what would they say? The gluten to come out. You know, so the kneading is very important for that gluten to be formed. We're about 2 minutes away. And I can say that this particular recipe will freeze very well. I had tried a couple of months ago of making 5 pounds of flour. And part of the problem was 5 pounds of flour was really too much for this bowl. I would have needed a commercial mixer. And I don't need that. Okay. Okay.
Sure.
Let's go over to here. I've got a piece of kitchen parchment. And as you can see, we'll probably be doing some hand kneading because its dough is still fairly sticky. The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. It's still a little sticky. So what we're going to do a little hand kneading. And the hand kneading, I'll take off all the dough that I can. I'd much rather that this become bread than wash it down the sink. And the primary thing to need is constantly pushing, it together. And as you will notice, the dough is relatively smooth. It is fairly tight. What I will do is make it into a ball. One of the things that all recipes call for is a little oil for allowing the dough that you're going to now allow this to rise. So what you want to do is you want to have the oil all around the dough so that it doesn't stick. Okay, and then you can either cover it with saran wrap or a moist towel. I'm guessing the moist towel is an older technology. Okay, we have now covered the dough. This would sit to rise for about an hour and 30 to an hour and 2 hours. Okay, often what I will do, because homes are different temperatures, what I will normally do is I've got an electric oven and I will put the oven for about a minute, just so that it gets a little bit warmer than room temperature. So that the yeast can have the opportunity to actually rise, and in the warmer area, it rises faster. And just think, now we've got another dough that's been rising for about 2 hours. Let me just take and now that this dough is now ready to punch down, basically take out most of the air, and sit for a few minutes or rest for a few minutes and then shape. Any more questions? And as you all should have received a copy of the recipe from me, if you want to ask any more questions to me after this, you're more than welcome. So let's say that this is rested for a few minutes.
Alan, there's a question. How many challahs do you plan that dough will yield?
Okay, it will either yield 4 fairly nice sized challahs, so that we'll say 2 couples, maybe even 3 couples, depending on their, or if you want for 2 people and you don't want a lot, it might do 6. Frequently I will make, since I like the challah, it's very tasty, I will normally make 4 to 6, depending on what it is. We have 2 daughters in the area, and frequently when they come over, even though you may think that making 4 to 6 challahs at a time is a lot, and freezing them, frequently it doesn't last as long as you would think it is. So if you're going to make it, I'm going to do basically if it's going to be 6, then I'll just cut each of these in thirds. And let me show you, well, that will be at the very end. Let's say I want to make it into 4s, and that I would guess that this is probably a more than a pound challah. And this is where you've got to just guesstimate. And then the simple little thing is many people will do more than 3 strands. The 3 strands is the least amount. There are 4 and 5, 6 strands. I like 3. It's simple. You don't have to give a lot of thought of the way you're braiding it. You know, I will make these. And hopefully that the pieces will be about the same length. And then, okay, braiding is simple. You're always putting from opposite sides into the middle. And this is what it looks like. If you wanted to, if you want to make it a little fancier, what you can do is you can take a small piece. You know, the learning how to braid at 4 and 5 braids is a bit more difficult. But what you can do is you can take this 3 braid and let's make another 3 braid. And basically you're doing the same thing. You're stretching it out. Now, if I were going to add, we'll say raisins, it would probably be at this point, because one of my fears is that unless the raisins were relatively dry, if you were to machine mix, there would be a tendency for the raisins to tear apart. So here's what all I would do with this is, okay, I'm going to make like a smaller challah, and instead of and now I can put 1 3 braid on top of another 3 braid. And let's see. What? The if you look, this is a 3 braid after it's risen and baked, and this is a 3 braid on top of another 3 braid. So it looks a little fancier. The traditionally, I will make say 4 to 6 challahs at a time. And with the convection oven, as I mentioned in the recipe, what you can do is if you don't want to use 2 ovens, you can if your convection oven is good, you can have two layers, but about halfway through, you'll need to basically put the one that's on top on the bottom, twisting it 180 degrees, as well as the one that's on the bottom onto the top, only because it's only a commercial oven where you'll get even enough heat so that they'll all bake at the same time.
I like seeds on mine.
If you like seeds. Let's see. I have both poppy seeds and sesame seeds. Those will be added right before you bake. So what you would do is you would allow the challahs to rise a second time. The second time it's 30 to 45 minutes. You know, and you know, once again, depends on the temperature. You know, usually I'll do it 45 minutes, you know, and then prior to putting on the seeds, I'll take off. These will be covered with the same saran wrap, or you know, piece of saran wrap. What's that to do is to avoid the outside of the dough drying out and breaking. So it's a less pleasant texture as well as look. You know, what you would do right before baking is you would take an egg solution, beat the egg. You might put in just a little water, but or none. Brush it on the top of the challah, and then gently sprinkle either sesame seeds or poppy seeds, you know, which are traditional. You know, so if we were to just do a 3 braid, and I didn't make another batch that would be baking at the same time. For tonight,
How long is the second rise?
the second rise is 30 to 45 minutes. You know, traditionally I'll do it 45 minutes, give it a little bit more time. You know, and even though it will get bigger, obviously, once you put your bread in a hot oven, you know, you will see the greatest amount of growth, you know, as it rises, you know. And with this, you know, as I said, and so the 3 braid will eventually look like this. And the 3 braid on top of the 3 braid will look like this. And any other questions?
Alan, what's the
Yeah.
temperature of the oven when you let the challah rise?
Literally all I'll do is I'll put the oven on for about a minute, just so it gets not hot, but just so some of the chill. It's a little warmer than your
What's the
your house.
temperature?
Well, I'll put it on even if you put it on for 30, you know, 300, 350, because it's only on for literally a minute. All you're trying to do is make the oven a little warm, you know, so it's not like you're putting it to get to a particular temperature. You're just putting the oven on just so it makes the place where you're going to be letting that dough rise or a second rise be a little warmer than, we'll say, the house, you know, because
So you would turn the oven on to 300.
it doesn't really matter, because remember, 300, 350, you're going to turn it on for just 1 minute. And
Right.
after 1 minute, you're going to turn it off, and you'll feel, okay, the oven is now.
You're not going to wait for the temperature to go to 350.
Right,
You're
no.
just going to turn it on.
Right.
Okay.
You know,
Alan, there's a question about the water temperature for the yeast. What should be the water temperature for the yeast?
the yeast, much will depend on whether the yeast is dissolved with the flour or not dissolved. The thermometer says when your dissolving method, i.e. you're going to dissolve the yeast in the warm water, it should be 105 to 115 degrees. Much more than that, and what it will happen is it could kill the yeast. And what you want is you want all the yeast, all those little buggers, to be eating the sugar and the flour, and to create the carbon dioxide, which makes the bubbles, which causes the dough to rise, which makes the challah lighter. So I've had this for at least 35, 40 years. You know, there are other ones. This one has a thing, the dissolving method from 40 to 46 degrees Celsius, or 105 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit. You know.
So there was a comment, in case everyone's not looking at the chat, from Clea, and she just wants everyone to know that vegan challah recipes are also generally known as water challah.
Right.
the recipes tend to have more oil
right,
and use sugar instead of honey.
right.
Thank you, Clea.
You know, and so so I've got 2 more loaves, so let's go with 3 more loaves to shape. And as you can see, this is a fairly quick process. Once you learn how to braid the dough, it goes relatively quickly.
After the second rise, how
And
long do you bake challah?
Generally, this recipe calls for about 25 minutes,
At what temperature?
350 degrees. And I believe that if you didn't receive a copy of the recipe, which really specifies all that, I'll be glad to send it to you. What was it? For Thanksgiving, my family asked that I do, instead of challah loaves, challah rolls, and it makes a delicious roll as well. And obviously, when you're making 6, it's obviously a smaller challah than when you're making 4.
So Alan, another question.
Shoot.
Have you made this recipe in a bread machine for the first rise? Sometimes, being pressed for time, the bread
No.
machine is a big help and curious for this recipe.
I've never used a bread machine.
Maybe someone out there has used the bread machine for baking challah.
Right. And as I said, in law school, I think I was using a mixer, but obviously not a mixer it didn't have a dough hook, nor was it strong enough to do that. So I was, most of the time I was kneading the dough by hand. And so for those two, if I were to, you'll see, you can either use a kitchen parchment, which this white paper is. Before there were silicone pads, I used kitchen parchment, and going back, it's probably about 20 years ago. Because these silicone pads are a bit newer. I was going to go up to a bakery supply store the weekend that an uncle died, and because I was very close with his daughter, obviously I went to the funeral, and on the way back I said, "You wouldn't happen to know if there's a baking supply store?" And literally 1,000 sheets of baking parchment. Now that you can find a lot of parchment, you can find in either Costco or online. But that's what the 3. This is probably 4 challahs to a recipe. And then you have to wait. And as I said, this second rise is really about a 45-minute rise. Now, I'll normally put it, let me just I will put it in the same oven, not having to adjust the temperature because it was a little bit warmer. And it's, once again, the reason for either the moist cloth or the saran wrap is so the outside doesn't dry out and break the dough. I'm going to let this rise outside, you know, because obviously I'll be baking later. And then, you know, once it's time to bake, 350 degrees, 25 minutes. If you should have a convection oven. If you don't have a convection oven, I wouldn't put more than one pan in because you don't have enough air circulating. The commercial ovens will have, I was a bagel baker. Before my term as president, and it was a commercial oven that had 5 trays, and the trays moved around so that even though the top of the oven was hotter than the bottom of the oven, at least the trays moving around helped to mix the temperature. And normally, for many years, I was putting on seeds, and then my children said, we like it without seeds. So the
Just recover.
oh, the cover.
Yeah.
I hope that Mr. Past International President Sudo is on the line. This was his thank you gift to the members of the executive committee. And yes, we use his challah cover on a regular basis at the Kahan house to cover our challah. Any other questions?
So Alan, speaking of Mr. Sudo, he asked the same question that I was going to ask you. So for many of us on this call, we're going to what at FJMC we call LDI,
Right?
the Leadership Development Institute. It happens to be located at Pearlstone Conference Center, which is in the Baltimore area.
Correct.
I believe you live in the Baltimore area.
Well, not far from Baltimore.
Not far.
And
So the question we ask is, it really looks good, but we'd really like to taste it. So how many of these challahs are you bringing with you to the LDI this weekend?
I can bring all of the ones that I'm making tonight.
There you go.
Here's the problem.
There was a woman who had been the chief cook, Rebecca, that I was going to ask them whether they would allow me to come up and bake challah for LDI. There is an issue of liability and the fact that I'm not a professional. So what I will do is, yes, I will be bringing up this challah. We can eat it. You know, you can sample it on hospitality. You know, because literally there's supposed to be no food that is brought up to the Pearlstone because it is a strictly kosher facility. I could tell you many years ago, before I was an officer, I had brought up, I was asked to do hospitality for one of the executive committee meetings there. So I brought a plastic tub with all the vegetables, the cut up vegetables and things. And I said to Mark Berlin, if you'll bring that back to me, that'll be fine. And he must not have fully understood me, because instead of bringing back the inexpensive plastic cooler, he brought me back one of the Pearlstone coolers, which was a much nicer cooler. Well, quite honestly, once it's out of their possession, they can't use it. But every time that I do use it, and we use it fairly frequently, I'm reminded of Pearlstone and thank them for that mistake. You know, but yes, I will be glad to bring all of these that I'm baking tonight Thursday, and hopefully there will be enough that will last until Friday, so that those emerging leaders and regional leaders that come up will have an opportunity to taste. Is that okay?
Alan, could you bake some fresh on Thursday morning for us? We don't want stale challah.
That's right, it's Monday.
It's Monday.
I'll see whether I can do that. Part of the thing is, as you know, you've got an hour and a half, then about now, all of a sudden you've got about 5
Sure.
hours.
I'll
So-
bring those to our children.
Right. You have to almost plan, okay, wait a second, 6, 7 hours ahead of time. So that means that I'd have to be getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, so that they'd be finished by the time I leave for Pearlstone.
So, Alan, another question. Boy, they're not letting you off easy here. Do you have a good Hamantaschen recipe?
No. My family has never been big onto Hamantaschen, and the problem that I have is if I were to bake them, I'd be the primary consumer of them. When I was in law school, there was a recipe. It was a potato sourdough bread, but part of the problem was the recipe made 2 relatively large size loaves, and the real problem was that before both had cooled off, one of them was in my stomach. And the last thing that I want is eating lots of Hamantaschen.
Do you ever freeze the dough after the first rise?
No, because part of the problem is that unless you're really careful, the question is whether you'll get a good rise, that second rise. And so I've always said, okay, wait a second, it's just much easier. Let's make it. Yes, that first, it takes an hour and a half, 2.5 hours till you braid it. I tried it once, and part of the problem was that you've got to be able to figure out, okay, at what point has it fully defrosted so that the second rise is an effective rise.
Well,
But you do
Alan,
freeze the.
But I
you
do freeze the finished loaves. And as I said, the finished loaves, when I take it out Friday afternoon, for the most part, while it's not as good as freshly baked, it's damn close.
So, Alan, we're getting a lot of thank yous. Making a good challah seems almost possible now.
Yes.
And as I promised, if nothing else, this was very entertaining and very you blessed us with a lot of your knowledge. I hope you learned as much in law school as you did from learning how to bake challah, because you really know your stuff. This is
He made dough in both.
yeah,
Right.
lots of dough. So for those few of you that aren't as familiar with FJMC, we're a very friendly group, but we're also a very competitive group. And the guy that keeps on popping up, Tom Sudo, actually did a challah baking a few years ago.
Right.
Let's see whose is better, because at convention, we're having a convention every 2 years. And this year, it's first week in July in Chicago, we're actually going to have a challah baking contest.
Whoa.
So Sudo and Kahan and all those others that might be out there will be there to I'm one of the official tasters. I just decided. So I just nominated myself.
Right.
So it
Congratulations.
should be it should be a lot of fun. So thank you so much, Alan, for doing this.
My pleasure.
One other political announcement. We need people to do these cooking webinars. They're so much fun, and we have like over 30 people tonight. So if you have any inclination, it's fine. Whatever you want to do, please contact me, dmiando@fjmc.com, .org, I mean, and or just call me, whatever. And we would love to feature. It doesn't have to be baking. It could be really anything. Anything. Challah baking at Convention News to the co-chair of programming. Tell me more. So thank you very much, everyone. It's great. Again, many of you will see in a few days. And for the rest of you, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And hopefully we'll continue to have these cooking webinars. Mr. Kahan.